All right, hello students. We're going to move on to part number 2 now. It says use the coordinate plane to answer parts A and C. So you might probably don't see this next to it. You're going to use the same coordinate plane on from part 1. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on. So here it says graph at least 5 points on the y-axis and label them. So before we did the x-axis, this time we're going to do the y-axis. And if you have a different color, now would be a good time to kind of pull out a different color. All right, so let's go ahead and take out our pin. So just like before, we're starting at the origin. If I decide to go up 1 here, and I label it, the x value here is 0. The y value is up by 1. I'm gonna kind of do the same thing I did on the x. I'm gonna why change it if I don't need to. So if I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, plot that point there and label it. This would be a 0 and a positive 5. If I kind of double that and I go up, I would go up 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So like I said, all we need is 5 points. You can really choose whatever points you want to. I'm going to kind of just choose kind of almost the opposites of what I did with the x. Just kind of we can see some similarities. And if you need to move these somewhere else to make it work, that's fine. Now let's go ahead and go below the origin. Remember, if the origin's right here with these two thick lines of the x and y, I'm sorry, I forgot to label this. This is our y. Intersect, if I go below it here, this is now a negative 1. It going in a negative direction. The x value is still 0, but we go into a negative direction or a negative 1. And of course, if I just simply go down 5 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the x value still is 0. And of course, the y value is negative 5. So once again, I labeled 5 points on the y-axis like it said to do up here. Label at least 5 points on the y-axis. I could put more, but that's all we're going to need to kind of answer the rest of the questions. All right, we look at question B. It says, what do the coordinates of your points have in common? So kind of like before, what do all of these points have in common? Well, hopefully you notice or look at this and notice that all the x values, when I try to line them up here, all the x values have a 0. Once again, kind of like the opposite when we did the x, all the y values have 0. On this one, all the x values have 0. So each point, as it has an x coordinate of 0. That's kind of what we should notice or what we see that they have in common. All right, so if we look at the question C, this is what must be true about any point that lies on the x-axis. Explain. So just like the other one. Well, if it lies on the x-axis, or on the y-axis, excuse me, then the x coordinate must be 0. So if a point lies on the y-axis, its x coordinate must be 0. All right, there you go. So that's kind of what we answered the question, what must be true? This must be true. If a point lies on the y-axis, its x-coordinate must be 0. Now we need to explain why is that true. So let's go and go through the explanation of why. It's because the point is not located to the left or right of the origin. Kind of like the other one was not up or down or above or below. A point on the y-axis is not left or right of the origin. So that's our good explanation. A point on the y-axis is either left, let's go ahead and fix that real quick and switch that up, is neither left nor right of the origin. Is simply right on or even with the origin. And that's one reason why it doesn't, the x is 0. Because all these kind of are, once again, are lined up with the origin. They're not going to the left or right on the x-axis. All right, if we look at the last question down here, if the origin is the only point with 0 for both coordinates, what must be true about the origin? So let's go ahead and put our box. So if this point right here, right in the middle, is the only point that is both 0, 0, what must be true about it? Well, the origin must be the only point that has both x and y coordinates of 0. So let's go ahead and put that in. That's because any point you put up here is moving away from the origin. Whether it could even be a fraction. We have whole numbers here, but a fraction actually could be part of the answer. So the origin is the only point that is on both the x axis, and the y axis. But because because the origin is the 0, 0, it has to be on both the x-axis and the y-axis. All right, so there you go. All right, we're going to move on to the next video. You got one more thing to cover about the quadrants to help us describe where things are located.